Hi, everyone. Welcome to How to Apply for Quality of Work-Life Grants webinar. This is a presentation by the New York State and CSEA Partnership for Education and Training. My name is Andrew Gage, and I will be your host for the webinar. Our instructor today will be Scott King. As I mentioned previously, today's webinar is sponsored by the New York State and CSEA Partnership for Education and Training, or as many people refer to it, the partnership. Some of you may be wondering, what is the partnership exactly? Well, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, the partnership is an organization that administers education and training programs for CSEA represented New York State employees through labor management cooperation. It is funded through the negotiated agreements between New York State and the Civil Service Employees Association. The partnership offers in-person classroom training, online learning, educational advisement services, grants, tuition benefits, labor management services, and other education and training programs, including the webinar you are attending today. You can learn more about us on our website or by calling us directly. I'll provide our contact information at the end of today's webinar. Now that we all know a little bit more about the partnership, let's get started with the How to Apply for Quality of Work-Life Grants webinar. I'd like to turn the presentation over to your instructor, Scott King.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. As Andrew mentioned, my name is Scott King. I have previous years with New York State DOT, and I've been with the partnership for a little over 7 years now. Today, we'll be talking about quality of work life, or QWL grants, offered by the partnership and how to apply for them. We'll provide you with an overview of the purpose of QWL grants, including the 5 different categories of eligible projects. We'll also go over the parts of the application, as well as the information you need to gather for each part. Finally, we'll let you know what to expect after you've submitted your application, including when to make your purchase and how to get reimbursed. I'd like to start by asking you a question. Have you ever applied for a QWL grant before? Raise your hand if you have. Wow, I see a lot of hands up. So many of you have done this before. That's great. Feel free to share your experience as we go along. For those of you who haven't applied for a QWL grant before, we'll be going through the process in full today. Feel free to ask questions as we go along. We'll stop periodically along the way for questions. This is a roadmap that shows what we'll cover today. First, let's talk about the basics of QWL grants. The Quality of Work-Life Grants program is open for enrollment April 1st through December 31st for New York State and CSEA labor management representatives. Applicants can receive up to $3,000 per grant category per fiscal year to launch programs and initiatives aimed at improving job satisfaction and the well-being of the CSEA represented New York State employees. A couple of important things to note. First, the QWL grant application requires cooperation from both CSEA leaders and state management representatives. Second, the grant funds must be used for the exclusive benefit of CSEA represented New York State employees. However, once the items are purchased, PEF and MC employees are allowed to use them at the discretion of labor and management. Again, moving forward, all of this information we are discussing today can be found in the QWL guidelines and how to apply sections located in your handouts and on our website. The 5 categories of eligible projects are break room, lunchroom improvement, which is stuff like kitchen furniture and appliances. Employee recognitions, that includes stuff like certificate, shirts, meals at recognition events. Wellness and health education, these are things such as a health, wellness, or fitness education program or speaker. Working conditions, things like air conditioners, fans, and ice makers. Or special projects, which are things such as bulletin boards or a nursing mother's lounge. Remember, you can apply for up to $3,000 per grant category each fiscal year. To apply for more than one grant category, you must submit a separate application form for each. Grant funding cannot be used to buy food or beverages for the worksite, purchase gas grills or smoke ventilators, replace commercial grade appliances that were purchased with a QWL grant fund within the last 4 years, purchase entertainment items or equipment, make capital improvements, give cash or cash equivalent awards, fund ongoing projects or recertification courses, and exercise equipment. There are also limitations on the break and lunchroom equipment and employee recognition awards. You can find more information on the details in your handouts, but briefly, the limitations are you can only purchase commercial grade coffee makers when you are purchasing for 11 or more employees. Microwaves are limited to a 2.0 cubic foot, 1 per 30 employees. Refrigerators have size restrictions based on the number of CSCA employees who will be using it. There are monetary limits on award types and meal types. For example, $8 for breakfast, $15 for lunch, and $30 for dinner. It is important to review the guidelines and limitations before you begin filling out the application. Make sure that your project or planned purchases work within these limitations. Okay, let's pause for a moment and see how you're all doing. Which of the following projects are eligible for a QWL grant? A, new refrigerator for the break room. B, a new treadmill for the facility. C, a stress management program for employees. Or D, a recognition event where employees receive sweatshirts with an agency logo. Thank you for participating in that poll. The correct answers are A, C, and D. The only project that is not eligible for a QWL grant is B, a new treadmill for the facility. This is because exercise equipment is not eligible for grant funding. Here are important purchasing procedures, which can be found in the guidelines. Never buy anything before you get written approval. Never use a personal credit card. Do not include sales tax. Never use the sales price in your quotes. Keep all invoices, original receipts, procurement and card statements, and copies of purchase orders. Now let's talk about filling out the application. Once you have reviewed the QWL grant guidelines and resources found on the website, please do not hesitate to reach out to your field associates for any further guidance. We can answer any questions you have, and we'll review your application once it's been submitted. Nikita Baker-Pierre works in Regions 1 and 2. I'm Scott King. I do Regions 3 and 4. And John Gray there, he does Regions 5 and 6. There are a few things you'll need to fill out on the QWL grant application. The application is split into parts that make them easier to remember. Part A is applicant information. Part B is the agency fiscal or procurement staff. Part C is your project narrative. Part D1 is the project budget worksheet. Part D2 is the participant or awardee list. This would be used for employee recognition grants only. Then your price quotes and any other attachments that may be necessary. Before you begin, though, you'll need to identify a project coordinator. This person will be responsible for filling out the application and all grant requirements on behalf of the agency or facility. They'll need to work closely with the agency fiscal officer. The project coordinator can be anyone. They don't have to be a labor or management leader. Let's go through each part one at a time. All right, I'll just take a pause. I see we do have a question. It says, how do you know what region you're in? So our regions are broke down like CSEA. They can be found on our website. So just a quick overview. New York City is Region 2. Long Island's Region 1. The Hudson Valley area is Region 3. Capital District is Region 4. Central New York is 5. And Western New York is Region 6. To be sure, you can look at our website and it shows you the breakdown of the counties by region, so you can be sure of what one you're in. Can you submit multiple grant applications per year? So you could submit one grant application per categories per year. If there's not any more questions, I'm going to move on. Part A is applicant information. Once you've identified a project coordinator, that individual will need to fill out Part A, which asks for information on the agency, including the facility, CSEA region, and CSEA local information. The project coordinator does not need to be a state manager. It could be anyone willing to take on that responsibility. The project coordinator will also need to identify the grant category for which they are applying and the number of CSEA represented New York State employees at the facility, broken down by their bargaining unit. Here's another question. Do you need signatures from both labor and management for your application? I see a lot of people have chose yes. And thank you for sharing your thoughts. The answer here is yes. Part A requires signatures from the labor and management representatives. The project coordinator will need to gather both signatures. These signatures can be provided digitally, or you can print, sign, and scan the application after you've obtained the signatures. The management representative is someone who could speak on behalf of and obligate the state, the agency, and physical facility location. If the CSEA local president is not available, then the executive vice president or a regional president can sign the grant in their place. How do we know what bargaining unit we are in? So if you're a New York State employee, your bargaining units are going to be ASU, OSU, ISU, or DMNA, which is the military division. So if you're not sure, you should reach out to your CSEA local president, and they could very easily tell you what bargaining unit you're in. So what is considered labor? Labor is going to be your local leadership. Every state facility has CSEA leadership. That's going to be the labor side. Let's see, I work for an agency that spans 2 CSEA regions, 4 and 5. How do I go about this? So you'd have to identify if your employees are in a local from the Region 4 capital area or the Region 5 Central New York. Those grants would be done separately for the respective places they're from. Does the project manager have to be part of CSEA or can they be PEF? So the project manager, they could be anyone. It could be PEF, MC, it could be CSEA, anyone that's willing to take on the responsibility of doing the grant. Okay. I'm going to move along. Part B is where the project coordinator details out the purchasing information. They will need to identify the individual or entity that will make the purchases and include their contact information and signature. This will be the agency fiscal officer or procurement staff. This person will oversee or delegate the procurement and reimbursement process and SFS activity if the grant is approved. This person should not change. Part C is the project narrative. This is where the project coordinator should explain the full scope of the project. The application guides you through this section in a series of questions. Be sure to answer each one fully. If you need more space, feel free to use additional sheets of paper or a Word document if you're submitting it digitally. Part D1 is the project budget worksheet. If in the application, there is room for a brief item description, quantity, cost per item, and total cost, as well as the number of CSEA represented New York State employees to benefit. You must fill out each field for each item that is to be purchased. At the bottom of the worksheet, you must include the total grant request amount in dollars. There is also space to add shipping costs and any other additional cost like installation. When filling this out, the PDF fill form will calculate all of this for you. However, it is strongly suggested to check your math. Any discrepancies in the budget worksheet will need to be corrected and will delay the approval of your grant application. So it's anyone. It literally can be anyone, the project coordinator. That's something that management and CSEA leadership should discuss. They should collaborate to see who's going to be the project coordinator. It can be, like I said, anyone. It's whoever's going to take on the responsibility of filling out the application, getting the quotes, doing all the work for it, and that's going to be our contact person when the grant needs repairs made to it, or anything that needs to be done. That's going to be the contact person for the grant. So it literally can be anyone you choose, and that should be done collaboratively with management and CSEA leadership.
So do they need to be a state employee, or they can be a CSEA person?
It literally can be anyone.
And then the agency fiscal person is going to vary by agency, and you may need to reach out.
Correct. So the agency fiscal person is going to be whoever, because these are paid for by the state side, it's whoever they decide is going to be the procurement person for the grant. Because they're going to be the ones that make the purchases either with a purchase order or a P card, and then they have to do the SFS entries in the end of the grant. All right. Here's another question for you. Should you include sales or discounted price items in a budget worksheet? The answer here is no. You cannot use sales or discounted price items as your quotes or on your budget worksheet. You must include the full retail prices. I always suggest that you circle the original price on your quotes since sales and original retail prices are usually listed together. Only include the original full retail price on the budget worksheet. This is because we can't guarantee that you'll get the sales price when you go to purchase. The delay between applying and purchasing can be several weeks because of the review and approval process. Part D2 is the participant or awardee list. This is only required for employee recognition grants, and this will be replacing Part D1. You'll need to include the name of each awardee, their CSEA bargaining unit, the award or meal type and cost, as well as the total cost. There's also a box at the bottom left of Part D2 section, summary and approval, that needs to be filled out and signed by an HR representative. Marked with a red box here on the slide is where you must note whether the employee attended after the grant was approved. If you're using QWL funds for an employee recognition event, you'll need to resubmit this participant or awardee list at the end for reimbursement as well, so be sure to keep a copy. Calculated totals will appear on the last page, Part D2, Section 2, Summary and Approval. The HR representative or designee must sign there to confirm the eligibility of employees. Please note, reimbursement is based on the number of individuals in receipt of an award or meal and the maximum cost per person found in the category limitations, not the total number eligible. If you are not applying for an employee recognition grant, you could skip this part. If you have leftover funds and you save money, you cannot use them to buy more things. So you can only buy, in your approval letter, you can only buy what you were approved for the price per items you were approved. Never buy anything that was not approved because you will not be reimbursed for it. Just like all of our grants, you have to be approved for the grant before the event or item is purchased. Anything that's done after the, before the approval will not be reimbursed. So always get your stuff in on time, and once you're approved, then you can hold your recognition event or go buy your refrigerator or whatever you're doing. All right. We're going to go through price quotes. In addition to a completed application form, you will also need to include price quotes for each item you are looking to purchase. If an item is $499 and under, 2 vendor price quotes are needed. If the item is $500 and above, 3 vendor price quotes or single source justification. Please review the purchasing procedures in the QWL guidelines for more information.
So a couple more questions. So what if a person says they're going to attend the recognition event and then they can't because they're ill, that's lost funds essentially, like the meal is still going to be paid for?
So they have to receive the meal or the award for it to be reimbursed. So I've seen this happen, and I've seen people take them the meal. I've actually seen at OPWDD, they could not get out of the houses. Someone was designated to take all the meals to that house, so people received their meals. So they have to receive the award or the meal for it to be reimbursed.
Okay, and then how do I return the funds? So the funds are not all dispensed, it's not all 3,000.
Correct. So
Reimbursement.
So it's a reimbursement grant. So what was asked, how do I return the funds? You're only going to be reimbursed for what you spend. So if you were approved for, just say, $2,500 for easy numbers, and you spent $2,300, you're going to be reimbursed for the $2,300. So it's whatever you spend up to your approved amount. And yes, the $3,000 limit per category per agency. So every CSEA is broken down by a local. Reach out to your field reps. They can tell you, how many grants you're allowed to do, and it's 3,000 per category. So there's 5 categories. So when you're eligible to do grants, that's 3,000 per category you could do every year. All right, I'm going to move on here. The attachment section is not an official part of the application, but it covers any additional information that you might need to include, such as extra pages for the project narrative, consultant resumes for training, or sample artwork for awards. I'd like us to do a quick recap. Based on everything we've discussed so far, can you tell me what you need to include in your application? Thank you all for sharing your responses. And a lot of people did. We really appreciate that. I think you're on the right track. You need applicant information, a project narrative, purchasing information, a budget worksheet, a participant/awardee list for employee recognition grants, and quotes or other attachments. Remember to fill out all required fields in the application. If you have trouble with any of the sections or you're not sure what to do, you can always reach out to one of the field associates or refer to the sample application. We'll talk more about this in a few minutes. Are there any questions about the application before we move on?
Here's one, Scott. Searching 2 or 3 vendor quotes. Do the products items have to be one and the same? They all have to be the same or comparable?
They have to be similar. They don't have to be the same product, the same brand. You want to look for similar sized equipment. But some people go crazy and they look for the actual same exact product. You don't have to do that. It has to be similar in size and what you're buying.
And then we did have a question about the grant year. So it doesn't fully coincide with the fiscal year, right? It's April 1 to December 31.
Correct.
Not to March 31st. So grant applications are accepted April 1 to March or to December 31.
Yeah, the year is April 1st to December 31st of that year. And as always, don't wait till the 31st to put them in. You have all year, and a lot of people wait till December. So I always recommend getting them in before Thanksgiving. So yeah, we'll move along and then we can come back to, well, I'll answer one more. What if the appliances are combined, air fryer, microwave? That's fine. We have a category for that. You would just list that as it's a combination unit. The next stop on our roadmap is completing the grant process. Before we get into the details, I'm curious, how soon do you think you should submit your application so that you can purchase your items in a timely manner? All right, I see a lot of quick answers of ASAP. That answer here is that it depends. The grant approval process can take as little as 2 weeks, but the speed depends on you and whether anything is missing from your application. We recommend that you send all your files in a single PDF. Taking the time to make sure that all the pages of your application are complete, legible, and in the right order helps us process your application. Let's take a closer look at the grant application timeline. Approximately 3 business days after you submit your application, you'll get an email confirming we received it. About 2 weeks from time of submission, you'll hear from us if anything is missing from your application. Finally, about 3 weeks after you've submitted your application or any edits needed, the management representative and CSCA local president will receive a written decision if approved. Again, please note, this is an estimated timeline. So let's see if another question here. When should you purchase your items? Okay, I see a lot of when approved, after approval. That's correct. So once you've received your approval letter, you'll have 90 days or until the end of the New York State fiscal year, whichever comes first, to complete the purchase and submit all required documents outlined within your approval letter. However, the purchase must not be made until you have received formal written approval. Agency fiscal or procurement staff will be responsible for making the purchases. It is important to wait for written approval before making any purchases. If you make a purchase before it is approved, you will not be reimbursed for it. Another important thing to note is that if any changes occur after you've submitted your application, you should request changes in writing. This includes changes that happen after submission and after approval of your application. Some examples of changes you must seek approval for would include price increases, vendor changes for like a wellness and health education grant. Changes must be requested through a partnership field associate with an email. You'll also want to keep all documents such as invoices and original receipts. If you're hosting an employee recognition event, make sure you keep a copy of the participant or awardee list included in your application. Use it again to mark the attendance. These documents will be necessary for completing the grant reimbursement process. Let's talk about reaching out for help. Who should you contact for help during the grant application process? All right, I see you've listed, some people have listed us field associates by name, some said field rep. As I mentioned earlier, you can reach out to one of us field associates for assistance with any questions that you have while filling out the application. If you need to request changes after you've received grant approval, you can contact one of us field associates for your region. As of last April, agencies are required to enter the general ledger journal entry directly into SFS and attach all required reimbursement documentation. Partnership coding will be provided to you within your approval packet. I mentioned a moment ago that you should keep all documents to complete the grant process, but what specifically will you need? When you submit the journal entry in SFS, you'll need to attach the following documents: final invoice from the vendor, proof of payment, the participant or awardee list, which these are for the employee recognition events, part D2 of the application, other documents as agreed to by the partnership, Office of Employee Relations, and grant applicant. Let's look at each one of these. Let's talk more about the general ledger journal entry first. Agencies will need to coordinate with their agency staff who are able to enter SFS general ledger journals. Once entered, the required reimbursement document should be attached to the journal. Once it's approved by the agency, it will automatically be routed to OER for approval. You'll also want to include proof of purchase or final invoice. This receipt or invoice should match the quotes that were included in the grant application. If there is a price increase at the time of purchase, stop, as you need to reach out and get written approval from the partnership first. I have another question for you. If you end up spending less money on your grant than your approved amount, can you use that money to purchase other items? I see everyone saying no. The answer here is no. Remember, you're only going to be reimbursed for what you've been approved for. This means that if you're able to spend less by taking advantage of sales, you cannot use the remaining grant money elsewhere. The size and price per item cannot increase without approval. We've had instances where folks have purchased more because the price dropped, or where they purchased a larger microwave than they were approved. And we're only able to reimburse the approved amounts. The next document you'll need to include is proof of payment. This would be a copy of the P-card statement, or if a purchase order was used, a voucher and SFS printout showing the voucher was paid.
So we had a couple of questions here for you, Scott. So can we request in writing for approval?
So if you're speaking, Edith, if you're speaking about like if a price increase, yes, you would send an email to one of your field associates stating that, just for instance, the refrigerator has went up $59, and you would request that increase be done, and then you will receive another approval packet.
And then a question from Ivy about how to calculate the precise price of something.
Okay. So I see you asked the exact price, including tax, shipping, handling, and fees. So for one, you don't pay tax. Everyone's going to be purchasing through a state agency, so they're tax exempt. So that won't be an issue. Shipping and handling, installation fees, you may have to put the stuff in a cart. And I'm not telling you to use this, but if you go to somewhere like Home Depot, Lowe's, Best Buy, Amazon, any of these retailers, you might have to put the item in the cart to calculate the delivery price, the installation, all those prices. It'll show them. And then again, like I said, I would circle them so you know what they're for. All right, I'm gonna move on. The next document is only needed if you've hosted an employee recognition event. You'll need to include Part D2, the participant or awardee list, with the attendee receipt column filled out to be reimbursed with grant funds. The project coordinator also needs to fill out and sign the reimbursement box on the lower right corner in Part D2 of the guidelines and application. Finally, you'll need to include any other documents as agreed to by the partnership and grant applicant. This might include things such as approval letter, approved items list, items purchase list, written approval for price increases or vendor changes. The approved items list and items purchase list are particularly helpful if you are purchasing multiple items with grant funding. If you're not sure if you need these additional items, reach out to oer/lmcgrants@oer.ny.gov. All right, we've covered a lot of important information. I'm curious, which grant category do you think would be most beneficial to your facility and CSEA represented employees? Thanks for participating in this last poll. I see a lot of break room, a few special projects. I hope you'll all consider applying for a QWL grant or reach out if you have questions. Thank you for sharing part of your day with us. Before we move to the question and answer period, I'd like to turn this over to our webinar host, Andrew.
Thank you, Scott. If you have any questions after today's webinar, please remember you may call the partnership at the numbers you see on the screen. You're also welcome to email us at any point. I'd like to mention that we have more upcoming webinars. If you liked this one, you may want to check out the partnership's website for a list of other webinars. At this point, if you have any questions, I'd like you to either type them in the chat box or use the raise hand button. I believe we're going to first start with questions that were asked previously in the presentation and then proceed from there.
One of the big ones was, can you talk one more time about the project coordinator? This can be anyone. It can be a state person. It can be a CSEA person. It could be labor. It could be management. It could be an admin. Someone said they had their admin do it.
It literally, it could be anyone. I've seen management do it. I've seen PEF do it, MC, CSEA. I've seen EAP people help them with it. I've seen LRSs help them do the paperwork. It literally can be anyone willing to take on the responsibility. And they need to remember that they're going to be the contact person when corrections need to be made, or if we have questions on the grant, that's going to be who we reach out to.
Okay. And then the other question we saw recurring was, can you say one more time the limit or the maximum amount of each grant per year, per category?
So first, you're going to want to reach out to your field staff to find out how many grants you're eligible to do for your certain area. For everyone that's eligible to do a grant, you could do up to $3,000 per grant category. So there's 5 grant categories I listed: break room, lunchroom, working conditions, employee rec, health and wellness education, and special projects. So you could do one of each of them every year for up to the $3,000.
Okay, and then one question we did not get a chance to answer, it never came up again, was if the price is of the item is over the allowed price, do you put actual price or just the price the grant will cover? So I think they're saying, can I use your grant to purchase most of something and then my agency covers the rest? Is that allowed?
So you can do that if the agency is willing to pay the overage, but you still have to follow all the guidelines with purchasing. So you want to put that all in writing with the grant that they're going to be covering the overage. But remember, anything you're buying still has to follow all of our guidelines.
Okay, and then regarding, again, I think the budget sheet brought up a lot of questions for some folks. So 2 or 3 quotes, depending on the cost of the item, do we put the lowest amount on the sheet? This was a question from Audrey. I'm thinking 2 to 3 quotes, they have to, are they trying to always source it from the cheapest place?
Correct. So we're using the quotes to give us a price range of what the item sells for. That's why you don't use sales prices. You're going to use the lowest original priced quote that you give us is the one you're going to put on your worksheet. And again, I recommend that you circle the vendor name and the original price, so that, because remember, if you put 2 quotes in for Best Buy for the same item, they won't be accepted. They have to be from different vendors. So that'll keep you from they're a common mistake made.
I'll just jump in quick there. I'm Brandy. I work in the Office of Employee Relations Grants Unit and handle mostly reimbursement. But as far as procurement goes, when you're getting quotes, you should really reach out to the person. The project coordinator is going to be the one, right, that's doing the footwork. But you should reach out to whomever in your facility or agency is responsible for procurement, because those are the people that are going to direct you the best to getting the right quotes we do require more quotes than they are going to anticipate, to be sure that we're getting the best cost, but these procurements still follow state finance law, so they have to be monitored by the procurement people. They're going to be the people that get you the information you need.
Great, thank you, Brandy.
Sure.
Proof of receipt required for meals and awards. I believe the answer is yes.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
Yes, you have to have proof of everything you purchase for the grant.
I do see a couple that are reimbursement related, and if the coordinator could also be the fiscal officer, yes, you could be the coordinator and the fiscal officer. The access to SFS that is required is the ability to enter a general ledger journal entry. So if you don't have that ability, then you would have to work with someone in your agency that does. But you can still be the person who does, as the coordinator, you can be the person who makes the purchase, certainly.
We did get a question about grants for PEF, and Catherine says that they have a mix of both PEF and CSEA. So how do they approach that, Scott?
So like we said in the presentation, you're going to be considering only CSEA New York State for the size of the refrigerators you might be buying, or you know, how many microwaves you're allotted. It's up to management and the CSEA local leadership as to who can use the equipment. But when we're purchasing, we're only considering the CSEA New York State employees in the numbers.
And then a question from Jill. Can you share, do you have any like one or two examples, Scott, of special project grants?
Yeah, Jill. So common ones we see go through is bulletin boards. And another one is the nursing mother lounges. It's basically a private place for nursing mothers to go. They're pretty much two of our most popular, special project grants.
And then Catherine had a follow-up. She was wondering if you knew about any PEF grants or grants.
So I can jump in here too from the grants unit. Yes, there are QWL grants for PEF employees. I believe that the application is posted to the union website. And I'm assuming, Christina, your question is sort of along those lines, two granting authorities being different unions. So you can get grants from both. There is no duplication of benefit restriction because you're asking each of those unions for equipment in line with the amount of represented employees, right? So if you have 50 employees and 25 of them are CSEA, 25 of them are PEF, those two applications will be separate and only for 25 people each.
Next in line was old appliances that were purchased previously. What do you do with those?
If the appliances are no good, you would get rid of them. That would be on you. You want to let your field rep know if it's one that we purchased that, you know, it's no good, we're getting rid of it, so that we could just take note of the inventory tag. It's especially important if something recent you bought, you know, we've had stuff hit by lightning, we've had stuff just go bad. It's really good to reach out to your field rep and let them know that.
I see that Chanel followed up. So to her question, reimbursement checklist on general ledger part 1, chart of accounts information. Are the series of numbers geared to that specific application?
No, they are not. The general ledger, so now with the approval letters and the reimbursement checklist, that string of numbers are for OER. So you will still need to be using your chart of accounts information, and the person who's entering those general ledger journals would recognize that string of that chart field string does not belong to that agency. It belongs to OER. Does that answer your question? They aren't, they're not specific to any application. It's a string of numbers that identifies a particular account of funding.
I see Jill asked for the breastfeeding pods, is there a way to connect the grant through here with getting pods to New York State? I'm not familiar with the breastfeeding pods. I kind of know what they are, but ours would be like for you, Jill, if SUNY designated a room for breastfeeding, there's a grant you could do to furnish it with the things that are approved for a breastfeeding room, for a lactation room.
Okay, and then there is a question, do non-members count as employees? So I'm assuming it's non-dues paying members.
So Amber, asking whether non-members count, we can't discriminate on whether they pay their union dues or not. So they would count as long as they have to be in a CSEA title. So if they're under the OSU, ASU, ISU, or DMNA contract, they would count.
To answer Marissa, do you give us the funding project coding for SFS? Not to make the purchase. So when, this is something we did see come up a couple of times. When the person is either reconciling their P card or in adding the coding to a purchase order or a requisition, that should be your typical coding that you would buy supplies and equipment from. We, because this is a reimbursement based grant, will reimburse that pot of money at the end through the general ledger journal. So when we are providing the coding, again, it's just for the general ledger journal. You can't use it to reconcile your P card. You can't enter it for requisitions. You'll get a budget error. Does that answer your question, Marissa?
I see an easy one to answer. Priscilla asked, can I order a couch? Couches do not qualify. Recliners do not qualify.
Tags, those come from field reps, right?
Right. So after your grant has been reimbursed and it's, you've gotten all your stuff, you've been reimbursed for it. The partnership has, OER and the partnership, you've been reimbursed. The field reps will reach out to you to come out and inventory tag the items. So you want to reach out to your field rep for this. We'll collaborate with you. And yes, there is inventory stickers that go on every item purchased with one of our QWL grants. So I see a question. I want to first touch on the one from Brenda. It says, if you are RFMH, then I think you're a non-member. I'm not sure what that is, but the best thing to do is reach out to your CSEA local leadership. Because the big thing is they just have to be holding a title of ASU, ISU, OSU, or DMNA to qualify for the grant. Yvette Frederick said, will a Ninja Slushy? If you're not sure on an item, I'd reach out to your field staff. Slushy machines don't necessarily qualify, but like a blender dispenser will. So if you're not sure, reach out to your field staff and we'd be happy, especially if you send us a quick clip of what you're looking to get. That helps too.
Oh, yes. Is there an approved item catalog that we recommend that they shop from?
There is no approved catalog to shop from. We don't tell you where to buy from. That's something you should talk to your team about. Some state agencies have requirements where they have to buy from. We don't tell you. We just use the quotes for the pricing. So you should really talk to your team of management, your purchasing agents, and your CSEA local leadership for that.
So if you use the P card to purchase something, you would use the DOT typical funding in your P card reconciliation, because the background of that is a little bit more complex, but the P cards are all automatically paid from an account. And when you reconcile the P card, you're telling OSU what to do in the background of where that money should actually be taken from for that purchase. In the general ledger journal entry, it should go back into the not the account that it was automatically paid from. It should go back into the account that where you entered the chart of accounts information for reconciling your P card. Does that make sense? And if you have more questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We can certainly give you a call.
Hi, Edith. I see your question here about the chart of accounts. I think Prior to OER handling the administration of reimbursement, I used to do it at the partnership. In our approval packets, we give the suggested account code for the item that you're purchasing. So let's say you're getting a picnic table that would fall under as office furnishings, or microwave would fall under the code for an appliance acquisition. So I think that's what you're asking about, and that's what I
Yep.
provided you in the past. And you would still have in your approval packet on our grants currently.
Yes, so you'll notice if you've applied for a grant in the past, this year we are going to be including the account codes. If you are purchasing anything that would be categorized as a supply, you'll have one account code. And if it's categorized as a piece of equipment like a microwave, it would be a different account code. It will tell you which one is which. It'll be all identified. But that's the only difference. I know where your question is coming from now, Edith. And so we'll definitely identify which is which and which one you should use for which of the items. And it's okay if it doesn't match the one that you were given to use, as long as it's in the same ballpark.
I'll answer what other questions we have, and then we'll wrap up the webinar for today. It doesn't look like there's any more questions. Feel free to reach out to us, or like Brandy said, the OER email's there for if they're reimbursement questions. If it's the front end of the grant, feel free to reach out to your field staff. We're all here to help you, because sometimes you think of a question later, that's fine. But I think we've answered everything, so we're gonna wrap up the webinar. Thank you for everyone for joining us today.